យើងអាចផ្សាយពីកម្មវិធីដែលអ្នកពេញចិត្តបានជានិច្ចអ្នកអាចស្ដាប់គ្រប់ទិសទីជុំវិញពិភពលោកវិធីដែលល្អនិងងាយបំផុតក្នុងការស្ដាប់វិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio គឺតាមរយៈទូរស័ព្ទឬនៅក្នុងឡានឬតាមរយៈកម្មវិធីផ្លូវការរបស់យើងមាននៅក្នុងគេហទំព័រ www.radio គឺជាវិទ្យុអ៊ីនធឺណិតដែលមិនមែនជាសំឡេង MP3 ថតទុកឬផ្សាយផ្ទាល់គឺតាមការថតពីមីក្រូផ្សាយតាមរយៈអ៊ីនធឺណិតជាមួយវិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio មិនថាអ្នកនៅតំបន់ណាឬស្ថានីយ៍ណានោះទេយើងអាចផ្សាយពីកម្មវិធីដែលអ្នកពេញចិត្តបានជានិច្ចអ្នកអាចស្ដាប់គ្រប់ទិសទីជុំវិញពិភពលោកវិធីដែលល្អនិងងាយបំផុតក្នុងការស្ដាប់វិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio គឺតាមរយៈទូរស័ព្ទឬនៅក្នុងឡានឬតាមរយៈកម្មវិធីផ្លូវការរបស់យើងមាននៅក្នុងគេហទំព័រ www.africbestradio.online ហើយដៃគូរបស់យើងមានដូចជា Afrik Best Radio លើ Pandora Afrik Best Radio លើ last.fm Afrik Best Radio លើ iHeart Radio Afrik Best Radio លើ Live X Live Afrik Best Radio លើផលិតផលនិងសេវាកម្មរបស់អ្នកដែលលើការផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មរបស់អ្នកអាចស្រមៃពីរូបភាពនៃម៉ាករបស់អ្នកដោយផ្អែក
Hello and welcome to Storytelling. My name is Richard and we are here from Afrik Best Radio live today this Saturday from 1 to 2 p.m. First of all, I'd like to thank to all the viewers who are listening in, and I would like to thank all the viewers who will be enjoying today's program. And to begin with, today's program, we will be talking about a movie. Once again, this will be like the movie we talked about a few weeks ago, where we'll be going into the movie, what's it about, as well as things that you can catch in it, things that you might want to focus on it, and a few things that might allow you to see if you would enjoy this movie or not, as well as who this movie might be for. So we'll be talking about all that in a bit after the break. Once again, we are Storytelling. I am Richard, your host today, and we'll be right back.
Afrik Best Radio គឺជាវិទ្យុអ៊ីនធឺណិតដែលមិនមែនជាសំឡេង MP3 ថតទុកឬផ្សាយផ្ទាល់គឺតាមការថតពីមីក្រូផ្សាយតាមរយៈអ៊ីនធឺណិតជាមួយវិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio មិនថាអ្នកនៅតំបន់ណាឬស្ថានីយ៍ណានោះទេយើងអាចផ្សាយពីកម្មវិធីដែលអ្នកពេញចិត្តបានជានិច្ចអ្នកអាចស្ដាប់គ្រប់ទិសទីជុំវិញពិភពលោកវិធីដែលល្អនិងងាយបំផុតក្នុងការស្ដាប់វិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio គឺតាមរយៈទូរស័ព្ទឬនៅក្នុងឡានឬតាមរយៈកម្មវិធីផ្លូវការរបស់យើងមាននៅក្នុងគេហទំព័រ www.africbestradio.online ហើយដៃគូរបស់យើងមានដូចជា Afrik Best Radio លើ Pandora Afrik Best Radio លើ last.fm Afrik Best Radio លើ iHeart Radio Afrik Best Radio លើ Live X Live Afrik Best Radio លើ Tune In Radio និងច្រើនថែមទៀតគ្រាន់តែវាយពាក្យ Afrik Best Radio គ្រាន់តែវាយពាក្យ Afrik Best Radio នៅកន្លែងស្វែងរកតើយើងផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មអំពីមុខជំនួយរបស់អ្នកយ៉ាងដូចម្តេចការផ្សាយ
Hello and welcome back to the program. Thank you to all the people who stuck by us and who are listening now. Let's get into the program. So today on Storytelling, we will be taking a look at a movie. Basically, we'll be reviewing and analyzing it. It won't be anything too advanced or too in-depth. It's just basically an opinion on the movie, a way to look at it, and some things that you might notice. If you do have any opinions on the movie yourself or have any questions that you want to ask about the movie, about the program, or about anything else, please leave them in the comments below on the Facebook chat, and we will be getting to it at the third and final part of our program. To begin with, today we will be looking at a new movie who's just come out, I think, around a month or two ago, called Soul. This is a movie that is animated. It came from the studios of Pixar as well as Disney, and it has been released to the streaming service of Disney Plus a little while back. Now, the release of this is mostly due to the fact that cinemas aren't really a viable way to get movies out anymore during these times, because as you know, everyone's been in lockdown, everyone's been in quarantine, and not many people are able to go out to the cinema as people usually do. So to begin with, let's take a look at this movie, things that you can expect and what it's about basically. Soul is about a movie about an artist, about a character named Joe Gardner who is a jazz musician. And in the movie, his main dream is to play jazz as a career. However, there are a few things that make it so that it is not that easy for him to get there, such as the fact that his way of making an income is working as a band teacher at a school for part-time and not for full-time, and a bunch of other things. And the movie is basically a look into the life of Joe, into seeing basically how his life progresses. Now, in the movie, very early on, we get a sense that Joe is someone who is really not only passionate, but very talented and skilled in the thing that he does, which in this case is jazz, and that means that around 10-ish minutes into the movie, he actually does land a gig playing with rather, or at least in the movie's context, a famous jazz musician who, honestly, in the terms of Joe's life, is probably his biggest dream at the point. And this is basically his goal, something that he's imagined or he's believed that his whole life is leading onto. And this is where the main conflict of the movie comes in, which is that Joe Gardner, the main character of the movie, finds himself falling into a sewer and dying. 10 minutes into the movie, he's no longer alive. This means that after 10 minutes in the movie, the setting kind of changes. And this is where the next little part of the movie takes place, which is in a realm called in this case, let's call it the Great Beyond and the Great Before. These are basically places where souls are created, as well as where they go after people die. It's a few things about the lore of the movie itself that you just have to watch it to get into it, but it's there. And the story basically is, at least from this point on, from the point that I'm willing to give away, is the story of the journey of Joe about how he gets back to his body, if he gets back to his body, and the struggle he goes through to try and get to this gig, this performance that, according to him, is the culmination of everything he's done in his life. That's the basic things that this movie is built upon, and there are actually a few things to look for in this movie. If you have watched it, these are things that you might have noticed. The first thing that you might notice is that this movie, in terms of visuals, in terms of topic, in terms of themes, isn't really what you'd expect from a regular animated movie, and I'll talk about this a bit later, or maybe in a bit. But basically, the movie Soul has kind of a more grown-up feeling to it, which is kind of different from the previous animated movies that have been coming out of the studios before. The movie Soul feels more like a movie targeted at adults than it feels like a movie that's targeted at the younger audience. And because of this little disparagement, you're allowed, or at least the movie is allowed, to tackle themes and concepts that might not be too appealing or too readily accepted by children. Movie Soul, in this case, tackles a few rather grim kind of topics and themes, such as the themes of purpose in life, the themes of the lack of purpose in life, the themes of life and death in general, and basically what it means to live, which kids might not be able to relate to. And myself, I'm not 100% able to relate to, but it is something that's interesting to look at, and it is something that works really well in terms of the way that it is written. These are just a few things that you might that you might be able to look for in terms of themes and stuff, but there are other things that you might look forward to and you might enjoy throughout this program. Some of these things include the visuals, the sound design, as well as the pacing and the characters within this movie. And of course, even though it is a regularly accepted thing that the studios of Pixar and Disney are studios that are relatively good at set designs, at scores, and all these kind of things, it really does help shine in this. It really does help shine in this kind of environment, in this kind of film, where not everything is being told directly to the viewer, where some things are more implied than they are said, and this is really helpful with things like the things that are in the background, the score, the sound design, all these kind of things. We talked about these things a little bit in our review of The Red Turtle, where it is a whole movie where nothing is said and everything is implied. And to some extent, that is also used here, although not in the degree that it is used in The Red Turtle. It does add a little bit of flair to the movie. And another thing to look forward to is basically the characters in the movie, and the two main characters that we follow, a soul named 22, as well as our main character, Joe Gardner, both have a kind of dynamic towards them that allows us to really get attached to them and to really believe their friendship with each other and all of these kind of things. We'll see if we have enough time to get into these kind of things later, and we'll see if we have enough time to get into the nitty-gritty and the kind of little different type of details within these two characters and other things in the second program. And the final thing that you might want to look out for in this movie is the pacing, or the story beats. I'd rather call it story beats than pacing, because pacing is more commonly known as the way that the story flows in relativity to time. The story beats in this case are how one scene transitions, how one scene matches with the other, and basically the different little components that add each other into the story, the movie that is so. And in these story beats, you can basically see what the movie is made out of. You can basically kind of get an idea about what the creators intended and about the things that they're trying to communicate to you, the viewer. The story beats in this movie are, in my opinion, excellently done. They flow really well from one to another. They have a really well-written and concise way of transition, as well as a very consistent way of having things stay consistent and basically flow in a way that makes sense to the reader and allows communication of ideas to happen between the two parties. In this case, the two parties being the reader and, well, not the reader, the viewer and the producer of the film. These are just a few things to look out for, and when we get back in part 2, we will be talking about such stuff such as things that really make the movie special. We'll be getting to that in a bit, and we hope that you stick with us because we will be right back after the break. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. This is Storytelling. I'm your host, Richard, and we will see you in a few minutes.
Afrik Best Radio គឺជាវិទ្យុអ៊ីនធឺណិតដែលមិនមែនជាសំឡេង MP3 ថតទុកឬផ្សាយផ្ទាល់គឺតាមការថតពីមីក្រូផ្សាយតាមរយៈអ៊ីនធឺណិតជាមួយវិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio មិនថាអ្នកនៅតំបន់ណាឬស្ថានីយ៍ណានោះទេយើងអាចផ្សាយពីកម្មវិធីដែលអ្នកពេញចិត្តបានជានិច្ចអ្នកអាចស្ដាប់គ្រប់ទិសទីជុំវិញពិភពលោកវិធីដែលល្អនិងងាយបំផុតក្នុងការស្ដាប់វិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio គឺតាមរយៈទូរស័ព្ទឬនៅក្នុងឡានឬតាមរយៈកម្មវិធីផ្លូវការរបស់យើងមាននៅក្នុងគេហទំព័រ www.africbestradio.online ហើយដៃគូរបស់យើងមានដូចជា Afrik Best Radio លើ Pandora, Afrik Best Radio លើ Last.fm, Afrik Best Radio លើ iHeart Radio, Afrik Best Radio លើ Live X Live, Afrik Best Radio លើ TuneIn Radio និងច្រើនថែមទៀតគ្រាន់តែវាយពាក្យ Afrik Best Radio នៅកន្លែងស្វែងរកតើយើងផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មអំពីមុខជំនួយរបស់អ្នកយ៉ាងដូចម្តេចការផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មរបស់វិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio ជួយសម្រួលឲ្យមនុស្សជាច្រើនស្ដាប់ទោះពួកគេកំពុងរវល់ការងារប្រចាំថ្ងៃហើយងាយក្នុងការផ្សព្វផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មអំពីជំនួយរបស់អ្នកវាផ្ដល់សម្លេងដល់យីហោ
Welcome back to Storytelling. This is the second part of today's program. My name is Richard. I will be your host today, as I have been and will be. And let's get back into the program. Before that, however, we have a few comments, or at least one comment on the Facebook Live that I'd like to address from Baishi. Hi, Richard. I failed my English exam. Of course you did. Now, continuing on with the program, we will get into a few things about the movie that makes it special. And in a sense, we will be basically taking a look at and talking about the soul of soul. So when you begin with, you look at the movie and you think, what is it about this movie that makes it special? What about the movie makes it, this movie in particular? And even though some movies do it to a smaller extent, even though some movies do it to a larger extent, most movies, or most stories in general, will have something that distinguishes them from other stories. This is kind of like their inner workings or something. It might be many different things, but it could be anything that basically allows this movie to be distinguished and this movie to be seen as kind of special and different from the other movies. In a sense, it's kind of like a little spark that each movie has, or each story has. And in this story, the spark of the story basically is the way that the movie tackles its topics, in a sense, the soul of soul. And there are a few things that I'd want to take a look at when taking a look at this topic. The first one being the journey of our secondary character, called 22, as they are brought back to the world of the living, and they inhabit the body of our main character, who is Joe Gardner. So in the sense, or to give context to this, or to give context to what we're talking about, we've already said how in the first act, Joe basically loses his life and gets transported into a place called the Great Beginning, or the Great Before, which is basically where souls come from. And here he meets a character, the secondary character, who is called 22. And 22 is a pre-soul, which in this case is a soul that hasn't been born yet, and they're marked as 22 because they're the 22nd soul ever conceived. And they've never been to Earth, never understood the things that make Earth basically worth going to, I guess. And the main character trait, or the main hook character trait that is 22, is the fact that they don't see a point in coming to Earth, they don't see a point in living, and they don't see a point in basically starting their lives. And it is in this kind of way that they don't have a reason to come to life that when they are shoved into the body of Joe Gardner, when they are shoved into this body that has experienced life and is given a chance to experience life, that you get a lot of little moments, you get a lot of little character moments and little things that happen that allow you to develop the character, which is 22. I mean, we do begin with by just having 22 as a character that is meant to be annoying and meant to be a character that lacks motivation to go forward and all this kind of stuff. But once 22 gets into the soul or the body of Joe Gardner and they start to experience things, you start to see a little kind of life brought into the character of 22. It starts with simple things. It starts with, well, before it gets to all that stuff, you're shown how 22 is basically terrified of the outside world and all these kind of things. But soon it starts to get to the little things that is appreciated by 22, because of course 22 in this case is not a soul that has lived. Instead, they are a soul that has never experienced things that are of the mortal realm. So you get a lot of setup to a lot of things that allow you to basically see some things about it. One of the scenes, the first scene that this kind of thing is basically exemplified is when 22 in the body of Joe Gardner gets a slice of pizza, and this is the first time that they've had any type of food or they've had anything that they've consumed. And just because of this little thing, they are able to appreciate a few things about life. And the rest of the journey of 22's character, at least from here until later on, is basically seeing the character discover little things and little kind of things about life that is appreciated. And these are kind of things that most people would overlook and most people would just glance past without a second's notice, because these are things that have been basically done to death by us. These are things that are passed by and not really acknowledged. But to someone who's never experienced them before, you kind of get this sense that it's special. Little things like enjoying pieces of candy, or feeling the wind, or little things like seeing a leaf or a seed falling from a tree. These are tiny little character moments, tiny little things that basically show us the smaller things of life, basically. And if you do watch the movie, if you do give it a try, be on the lookout for these kind of little moments, because they do really make the movie shine. And these moments aren't just good because of the way they're written or good because of the things that they represent, but you can't go into these moments without acknowledging the other things that make them work. The excellent color design and the way that the light is animated in a lot of these movies, or a lot of these scenes that allow us to basically get a feel of how the character is feeling. It basically just works, and these are things that can't really be described. These are things that are better if you just give the movie a watch, or give these scenes a search on YouTube or anywhere, and just allow yourself to experiencing them yourself. And another thing that the movie so really tackles and really gets and makes it their identity is basically the concept and the idea of meaning, the idea of purpose, the idea basically that everyone is born for a reason and everyone has something that they have to do, basically a purpose in life. And while it is okay to disagree with this movie's interpretation of it, and it is definitely not the absolute and only right interpretations of it, there are interesting things that come from the movie's interpretation. There are many interesting arguments and many interesting ideas that are brought up by the way that the movie conveys meaning. Early on into the movie, there is a concept that is being introduced to the characters as well as to the people who are watching, and that is the concept that for a pre-soul, or at least a soul, before they are born, to finally be ready to go to Earth, they have to find something about themselves that allows them to go. And this concept that has been introduced, I think, around 16, 17 minutes into the movie, not only persists throughout the whole movie, but grows and changes and evolves into this really nice little motif about meaning and about purpose and about the difference between having purpose, not having purpose, and the nature of purpose in general. It's a really fun thing to think about, and it's a really fun thing to basically acknowledge and give thoughts to. Once again, this is a movie like The Red Turtle that is really nice to talk about with people during or after. But again, these are not the only things that the movie does. Moving forward, the movie also tackles the lack of purpose, as you see in one really well animated scene. You have a scene where the life of Joe Gardner is brought in front of him and is shown to himself and 22, where he gets to see that even though he perceives his life as one that is full of meaning and one that is full of adventure and all these kind of things, when you take a step back to look at it, it's rather dull. And the movie does a really strange thing by when they tackle this, because they don't make it so that the opinion of Joe's life changes. It doesn't get to a point where you are told that, oh, there's a lot of things you're missing from his life, and there are things that make his life actually amazing. At the same time, it doesn't make an attempt to say that his life is worthless. Instead, you're given some things to think about, and you're given some things to think about in terms of whether or not the purpose to Joe's life is what drives it forward, or whether it is just himself that drives it forward. And there are these kind of things that are just sprinkled in throughout the movie that really make it a treat to basically just think about afterwards and just have a conversation with someone, if you have someone to watch it with. And the final great thing about Soul that gives it its spark is the visual that is being used. The characters are rendered in really smooth and really dynamic kind of 3D animation. The background sets are really well done and has a sense of realism to it that makes it close enough to reality for us to feel the impact of it, while still remaining cartoony enough for us to understand the abstract sense of it. There are a lot of scenes in the movie that are absolutely beautiful to look at, such as the scene in which Joe ascends to the great beyond, or the scene in which 22 catches a falling maple seed that has been spinning towards them, or a myriad of other scenes that combine basically excellent color design, excellent set pieces, and excellent character designs together to make just a buffet of information and a complete overload of things that basically flow into your eyes and allow you to get the feel and the emotion of each of these kind of scenes. These are things that make Soul special. These are things that allow it to be a movie that is worth giving a try, even if you're not into these kind of movies. Because in the end, the sparks of movies aren't what makes it good, it's what makes it unique. And in this sense, Soul itself is quite a unique movie, not to mention the fact that it is not an animated children's movie. Instead, it's an animated movie that is aimed towards a more mature audience. We'll talk about some of these other things when we get back, such as things that you might like about it, things you might dislike about it, who this movie might be for, and we'll be taking a little delve into the medium of animation and talking about that for a little after the break. On top of this, if anyone listening has any questions or opinions on the movie, if they've seen it, or if they'd like to see the movie, or if they have anything at all to say, please leave it on our Facebook chat and we will be reading it in the final section of the program. So once again, this is Storytelling. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere, and we will return shortly.
Afrik Best Radio គឺជាវិទ្យុអ៊ីនធឺណិតដែលមិនមែនជាសំឡេង MP3 ថតទុកឬផ្សាយផ្ទាល់គឺតាមការថតពីមីក្រូផ្សាយតាមរយៈអ៊ីនធឺណិតជាមួយវិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio មិនថាអ្នកនៅតំបន់ណាឬស្ថានីយ៍ណានោះទេយើងអាចផ្សាយពីកម្មវិធីដែលអ្នកពេញចិត្តបានជានិច្ចអ្នកអាចស្ដាប់គ្រប់ទិសទីជុំវិញពិភពលោកវិធីដែលល្អនិងងាយបំផុតក្នុងការស្ដាប់វិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio គឺតាមរយៈទូរស័ព្ទឬនៅក្នុងឡានឬតាមរយៈកម្មវិធីផ្លូវការរបស់យើងមាននៅក្នុងគេហទំព័រ www.africbestradio.online ហើយដៃគូរបស់យើងមានដូចជា Afrik Best Radio លើ Pandora, Afrik Best Radio លើ Last.fm, Afrik Best Radio លើ iHeart Radio, Afrik Best Radio លើ Live X Live, Afrik Best Radio លើ TuneIn Radio និងច្រើនថែមទៀតគ្រាន់តែវាយពាក្យ Afrik Best Radio នៅកន្លែងស្វែងរកតើយើងផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មអំពីមុខជំនួយរបស់អ្នកយ៉ាងដូចម្តេចការផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មរបស់វិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio ជួយសម្រួលឲ្យមនុស្សជាច្រើនស្ដាប់ទោះពួកគេកំពុងរវល់ការងារប្រចាំថ្ងៃហើយងាយក្នុងការផ្សព្វផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មអំពីចំនួនរបស់អ្នកវាផ្ដល់សម្លេងដល់យីហោរបស់អ្នកនៅបទពិសោធន៍ដ៏អស្ចារ្យអំពីម៉ាកនិងអាជីវកម្មរបស់អ្នកយ៉ាងពិតប្រាកដពិតជាពិសេសមែនទែនវាជួយអ្នកស្ដាប់ជ្រាបអំពីផលិតផលនិងសេវាកម្មរបស់អ្នកអ្នកដែលលើការផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មរបស់អ្នកអាចស្រមៃពីរូបភាពលើការផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មរបស់អ្នកអាចស្រមៃពីរូបភាពនៃម៉ាករបស់អ្នកដោយផ្អែកលើសារដែលអ្នកបានផ្ញើតាក់ទងមកយើងនៅថ្ងៃនេះ
Welcome back to the program and welcome back to Storytelling on Afrik Best Radio. We have reached our final part of the program where we have looked at a few different things and we have finally arrived at the final things that we will be looking at. These are things such as things that you might like in the movie, things that you might not like in the movie, as well as who might enjoy this movie, and we'll be talking a little bit in the end about the medium of animation. So, to begin with, let's talk about some things that you might enjoy about the movie. We talked about a lot of things that made the movie unique, but let's talk about some things that you might actually get from the movie, things that you might enjoy and things you might basically allow yourself to experience and might make you want to watch the movie again if you do watch it. The first thing that works really well with this movie, surprisingly, well, not exactly surprisingly, but despite the fact that this movie has a more mature theme and more mature ideas that are being pushed into it, it does make room for some, at least in my opinion, really well done comedy. Pixar is a film studio that is known for its great comedic timing, as well as character comedy in different type of scenarios and all these type of things, and that shows as well in this movie because there are a lot of scenes that basically kind of take the viewer off guard and allows them to laugh a little bit in terms of a more serious kind of depiction of a movie. But even though that some people might think that this kind of comedy and this kind of adding in comedic timings to these kind of movies is distracting, in my opinion, it is something that I personally enjoy and that other people might enjoy as well. And again, an older, mature audience will enjoy this movie for the older, mature themes about existentialism, about life, about the lack thereof of life, and about things that are worth living for, purpose, and the lack of purpose. And these kind of things are really well exemplified through different ways, and visuals, and the storytelling, and the story beat, and all these things that we've basically just mentioned. But if you're into that thing, this is something that you can definitely enjoy within the movie. And to those people who just love eye candy, who just love things that look visually appealing, aesthetic, and really enjoy scenes that flow really well from one to another and really enjoy great visual storytelling, again, this is a movie that is definitely something you'll be able to enjoy. It's not as heavy on the visuals as Red Turtle, but it is really well done regardless. I've mentioned this before and I'll mention it again. Color design is excellent in this movie. Visual design is excellent in this movie. But not only that, but the score is also really well done. And in terms of character design, I like to point out a set of characters, or at least basically a group of characters called the Jerrys and Terrys in this movie, which in my opinion are designs that I find really interesting to look at and that work really well in the context of the movie and move around. Basically, the way they move around and the way they interact with the movie, the sets and the pieces and all these kind of things are a treat to basically look at. On top of visuals, other things that you might enjoy, on top of visuals and sound design and basically the superficial in the movie, other things that you might enjoy are the character interactions within this movie. Of course, this movie isn't free from character cliches, such as having the character split in the third act and having kind of a few things that you might find predictable, but just because they're predictable doesn't mean they're not enjoyable. And a lot of characters in this movie really do excel from having a style and personality put into them. Characters such as Moonwind, which you will meet around almost halfway into the movie and becomes a sort of tertiary character throughout the rest of the movie, is a character that is not only really well animated, but the personality and style that the studio puts into this kind of character, which is only on screen for less than, I say, 10, 20, 30 minutes of the movie, is really what shows how these kind of character design and these kind of things really pop. Other type of characters, such as the Lost Souls, are also really well designed and are also really well animated. And I've been saying this a lot, but it is something that you can expect from Pixar, and it is something that is not wrongly expected from Pixar, because it's also what they're sort of known for. They are a studio that excel in really pretty animations and making things look gorgeous. And these are things that you will like about it. Not only that, but they are a studio that do really good character writing and tight character, basically kind of, they write really tight character interactions. So in this kind of film, where character interactions are really important between the different characters, it works really well. And an outstanding scene that I might recommend that you check out, although it is a scene that contains spoilers, it is one of the more intense and one of the more basically forefront scenes of the film that you can really tell the animators as well as the voice actors as well as the writers put everything into. And this would be the scene where Joe finally confronts his mother about, basically, in this case, everything. And it is so beautifully done, and it is so well written, acted, recorded, edited, and put together that it really shows off what this movie has to offer. This is another thing that you might enjoy from the movie. But again, let's move on to other things that you might like about the movie. So far, I've mentioned the comedy, the characters, the visuals, as well as the story beats. And another thing that you might enjoy about the story with the themes and all this kind of stuff is just how well it wraps up, and the way that this movie is one where you can once again have a conversation with. It's a movie that leaves a lot of loose ends at the ending of the movie, where a lot of things are left to speculation. What happens to Joe after that final scene? Does it matter what happens to Joe after that final scene? And all these other things that will make a fun time for you and anyone you're watching with to just basically have a way, or basically have something to talk about and basically have something to interact with each other and to talk about the movie. Because this, once again, is a movie that is really well enjoyed if you're able to communicate about it after the fact. And now let's get on to the next thing, which is, who exactly is this movie for? If you're thinking about it, who would enjoy this movie? Well, unlike other animated films that Pixar has made, this might not be extremely enjoyable to kids, basically people around from, the ages of born to around 10 years old. And they might not enjoy this because they might not be able to fully understand and fully internalize the themes that they're talking about. Or, some parts of this movie might just be too sad for them. And not sad in the sense of a character death, rather sad in the sense of just gloomy. It happens a lot throughout the movie, and it is something that I would mark as a strength of the movie, where it is able to not only get gloomy, but do so in a way that allows it to really connect with the audience. But again, this is something that might not be exactly the best thing for, the little ones. So the people who will enjoy this are rather an older audience. There's no reason why teenagers can't enjoy it, although most likely they won't be able to enjoy it fully. In a sense, the people who would enjoy this movie the best isn't determined by age or class or group. It's rather the people who basically are able to understand the things that the movie are talking about. People who've gone through a time where they've questioned their purpose, where they felt like they didn't have one, or where they felt like they definitely had one. People who can appreciate the themes of this movie will be able to enjoy it immensely, because this movie is one that is really focused on these kind of themes. So you look at different things, you look at the themes and the gloomy atmosphere of some of the parts of this movie, as well as the heartwarming, more wholesome atmosphere of these other parts of the movies. And if these are a thing that you're into, if you're into deeper and more existential themes, this might be the movie for you. If not, and you're just looking for a movie that does something different, this might also be a movie for you, because even though it does stick to some traditional aspects of storytelling, it does do a lot of unique things, which we have talked about in our second part of the program, that separates it from other kind of movies in the genre and other kind of movies in this type of environment. Finally, let's talk a little bit about the animation medium. We mentioned this before, or at least we've talked about an animation before in the sense of the Red Turtle, and now we're talking about another animation in the form of Soul. These are two absolutely different movies, which only common thread is the fact that it's animated and the fact that its audience is aimed at a more mature kind of crowd. And the reason I want to talk about the type of animation, the reason I want to talk about animation as a genre is because for a while now I've been told, or I've been given the impression that people usually think that animation is more of a genre than it is a medium. It is more of a kind of, basically, they group animation in the same type of categories as, let's say, an action movie or a comedy. And the reason I want to mention this now is because I hope that after looking at these two movies and seeing how different they are, you will understand that animation isn't exactly a genre, rather it is a medium in which stories are told, because they can be extremely different and extremely varied from each other, and they can tackle topics that are in very different ways. And there are a lot of strengths to animations, and to those people, because I know there are a lot of people, to those people who basically think that animation are only for children and are unwilling to try them because they are past their childhood, I do recommend you go give some of these films a try, such as Soul, The Red Turtle, and a few other films that I can't really think off the top of my head. But basically, animation as a genre, or animation as a medium really does open up the doors to a lot of different types of visual storytelling and a lot of different type of storytelling in general. Because when you're working with animation, you have this thing called the suspension of disbelief that basically means that anything can be shown on the screen and it can be just chalked down to the fact that it's animation. It can be really beautifully done, it could be really chalkily done, but basically it allows you to have a visual style and flair that live action just can't achieve. To those people who would be interested in these things, there are a lot of animations that might be great for you to check out, and if that's the case, leave a comment on the page or leave a comment on this video, and I will send you, or I will post a list of just a few animated movies that might allow you to get into this kind of mindset. That's basically the brief talk I've had about animation, and that's basically the brief thoughts that I've had about it. So finally, let's get into the final little thing of our program, which is looking through the comments and seeing if anyone has any questions or concerns. We've already addressed Pai's comment about the failed English exam, and let's go through the others. First, I'll give it a little read, and I will be right back to answer the questions. In the end, there doesn't seem to be any questions. In the end, it seems more like people are having a conversation in the comment section. But let's give some acknowledgement to Jeffrey Hassel, who has been watching and calling me Dr. Megahertz, which I am still unsure if I'm going to keep that name or not, but we'll see about it. To Swae Lee, who says Rona. I am unsure what that means, but thank you for the comment. To Paishi, who has commented and watched in the beginning, although sadly I do think that she is gone now, but a big thanks to you as well. And to all the other people watching, such as Maddie Skeleton and the other people who I am seeing as watching on the stream right now. Of course, if you're watching on other platforms, a big thanks to you as well for tuning in and for giving our program a try. We hope you enjoyed, and we hope that you will give this movie a try, or if you've tried the movie, we hope that you will enjoy the movie a little bit more from hearing some of the thoughts and opinions on this. Once again, it's never too late. If you have an opinion on the movie, please leave it in the comment, and I will try to get back to it as soon as possible. So that is all we have for you today. This has been Storytelling. We hope you've enjoyed, and we will see you next week on Afrik Best Radio.
Afrik Best Radio គឺជាវិទ្យុអ៊ីនធឺណិតដែលមិនមែនជាសំឡេង MP3 ថតទុកឬផ្សាយផ្ទាល់គឺតាមការថតពីមីក្រូផ្សាយតាមរយៈអ៊ីនធឺណិតជាមួយវិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio មិនថាអ្នកនៅតំបន់ណាឬស្ថានីយ៍ណានោះទេយើងអាចផ្សាយពីកម្មវិធីដែលអ្នកពេញចិត្តបានជានិច្ចអ្នកអាចស្ដាប់គ្រប់ទិសទីជុំវិញពិភពលោកវិធីដែលល្អនិងងាយបំផុតក្នុងការស្ដាប់វិទ្យុ Afrik Best Radio គឺតាមរយៈទូរស័ព្ទឬនៅក្នុងឡានឬតាមរយៈកម្មវិធីផ្លូវការរបស់យើងមាននៅក្នុងគេហទំព័រ www.afrikbestradio ជា Afrik Best Radio លើ Pandora Afrik Best Radio លើ last.fm Afrik Best Radio.online ហើយដៃគូរបស់យើងមានដូចជា Afrik Best Radio លើ Pandora Afrik Best Radio លើ last.fm Afrik Best Radio លើ iHeart Radio Afrik Best Radio លើ Live X Live Afrik